Valentino from Jackson Lewis. Today, what I wanted to do was talk about harassment training. And this is not going to be sort of 20 minutes of the same, it's really important to do it, it's really important to do it type of presentation. It is going to be probably one of the first of many that you will hear about the need for HR professionals to relook at their harassment training programs and to become more progressive. Why are we doing this now? In June of 2016, last month, the EEOC came out with a study, a report on harassment training. And as you know, I do a lot of SHRM Long Island presentations, and we talk a lot about this stuff, about going out and doing education training for managers. The report, when I read it, it was eye-opening. And we need to start the dialogue. As HR professionals on Long Island, we need to be thinking about the content of this report and, again, rethinking the way that we approach this in our workplaces. We start out by talking, as just a reminder, why do employers train? Why do we do this stuff? Well, the first reason always is it makes good legal sense. We know that going out and educating our supervisors and separately our non-supervisory employees on anti-harassment in the workplace and how to complain about harassment in the workplace, we know that by doing so, we are preventing some harassment and also empowering some employees to complain. Why are we doing this? Because we want to address these issues before they become problems, i.e. EEOC charges, state division complaints, or what's worse, a litigation, all right? When we put together our supervisory team and we do training, we are forcing those individuals to take recognition of the fact that they have a special authority in the workplace. So you are creating a supervisory mentality by doing this type of training. And last but not least, when looking at training from the legal sense, we're building in an affirmative defense. In 1998, the Supreme Court gave us an affirmative defense, basically saying, look, employers, if you have a complaint procedure and you go out and you train your supervisors on how to complain about harassment, and you educate your employees on the need to complain about harassment, and you do all of these good things and you get sued, well, we will insulate you from punitive damages in these cases. So we have affirmative defenses whenever there is a harassment lawsuit. That's the legal sense. From a practical sense, why do we do this? Well, we do it because we want to operate in good companies and we want our employees to like their workplaces. We want to insulate ourselves from the community reputational harm. Right? We want to make sure that employees look at us and say, that's a culture that I want to be a part of. It's not a culture where harassment may run rampant. And certainly the practical effects of doing this training and in an effort trying to prevent harassment from taking place is we want to keep our good people. We don't want a talent exodus out of the company. And for no other reason, we do training because it's the right thing to do. To get out in front of all of our people and say, this is not how we want to operate. Up until now, most of the people on this call, this is why we do training. And these are not bad reasons. In fact, they are certainly motivating reasons. But when you look at the statistics that the EEOC included in its task force report, I'll tell you, from my perspective, I sort of agreed with the EEOC. Why is it not more effective? Why are employers not more effective in preventing these harassment claims and preventing not just the harassment claims, but harassment from taking place in the workplace? In 2015, close to 90,000 EEOC charges, close to 30,000 of them were rooted in harassment, almost a third. All right, you look at these numbers in terms of damages and recoveries, and they're staggering. $126 million recovered for employees by the EEOC, just the EEOC, in pre-litigation stages of harassment claims. Sexual harassment constitutes almost half of all harassment complaints in the workplace, with the remaining half being harassment, hostile work environment on the base of your other protected categories, including race and disability and age. And then when you aggregate the last 5 years of settlements, the numbers are sick, $700 million. So my point, and certainly the EEOC's point, we do training for all of the right reasons, but to a large extent, what we're doing isn't necessarily as effective as we intended it to be or that it should be. So this EEOC study comes out in June of 2016. I invite you to go and download it. There are 90 pages filled with very interesting information. Certainly a lot of it is skimmable, but as HR professionals, take a look at it. What you will ultimately learn is that after 18 months of analyzing issues associated with workplace harassment, the EEOC has reached the conclusion that our workplaces are still plagued with harassment and harassment-type situations. While the report focuses a lot on those causes, I thought what was interesting about the report is they also gave us a lot of insight on prevention, not 1980s or 1990s prevention. And this is 21st century prevention. Some tidbits on how the EEOC thinks employers can do a better job of effectively preventing harassment in the workplace. And I wanted to speak to you about that today. Why does harassment in the workplace persist? Some of the reasons that the EEOC report, and certainly from my experience and perspective, some of the reasons that I want you as HR professionals to consider the ineffectiveness of our current programs. Reluctance to report. Employees not wanting to take advantage of a program for various reasons, not necessarily to create a better or a case in litigation, but for different reasons, for personal reasons. So reluctance to report. An employer's lack of focus on the true business benefits of actually having an effective preventive program. Lack of buy-in from the top. Often we talk about how important harassment training is and anti-discrimination training, but is it lip service? Do we really care? Do we really want to prevent it, or do we feel that it is an obligation that we talk about it? Do our practices reflect our intent? And frankly, training in and of itself is ineffective, and it is very rote, and to a large extent has become stale. So just digging in on all four of those, reluctance to report, the study the EEOC did estimates that 3 out of 4 people who experience harassment in the workplace never report it for various reasons. Well, for one, you may be dealing with a population of employees that doesn't really know, has a level of ignorance to the law. Everybody has handbooks. People should look at the handbooks. They should read the handbooks. So I'm not sold on ignorance to the law. But a lot of times employees may be embarrassed by the fact that they are the focus of harassment. They may be confused about what to do. They may be uncomfortable with conflict. They don't want to take on a supervisor or take on a coworker. They fear that somebody won't believe them. Maybe the person who's giving them a hard time is your 5-star employee who is the most profitable salesperson or the person who has escalated up the corporate ladder quicker. And there is a credibility issue here that they won't be believed. Maybe they don't want to be involved in an investigation. Maybe they don't want to be ostracized by a group. Maybe it's just fear of being a target. For all of these all add up, in my opinion, to employees not reporting because they have a lack of confidence in their supervisors and, frankly, a lack of confidence in their human resources department. Is there a failure from a corporate standpoint to focus on the real business benefits of doing effective harassment training? we always look at harassment training as we need to do this because if we get sued, lawsuits are expensive. And we think about, oh, how much are the attorneys going to cost us? What is a settlement going to cost us? That's reactive thinking. And if anybody's ever heard me speak over the last 15 years at SHRM Long Island meetings, we always talk about don't be reactive. We want to be proactive. We want to be leaders in our businesses. And I think facilitating a proactive approach to harassment really creates a healthier workplace, right? When we actively think about training, all right, we're not necessarily addressing the major symptoms of the training. We're only addressing the problems that emerge out of them. Not looking at this in the right way results in increased turnover, decreased productivity, reputational harm. All of these things cost our businesses money. All right, so maybe a refocus on the right way to approach training. What about from the top down? Do your executives look at this as an obligation they have to do once a year or an opportunity to communicate about the culture that he or she or they want to instill in the company? Do your executives take it seriously? Do they buy in? How many times do you run anti-harassment training and at the last minute your executives say can't make it? Do they participate? Do they set the tone in those meetings? Do they listen attentively? Do people see them getting involved? Once the training takes place, is it forgotten? Do they hold people accountable to it, their best and their worst performers? Do your executives create a culture, or does the culture create them and dictate their responses? All very important questions. And finally, the training itself. Is it meaningful, or are we just going through the motions because we did it the same way last year and the year before? Are you centered too much on the legal issues that will put people to sleep? Right? Is it too much? Are we focused too much on responding to harassment as opposed to preventing it in the first place? From an HR perspective, do you look at training as merely a box that you check every year? Or are you looking at it as a way to create daily expectations for the way that people conduct themselves in the workplace? Has your training become stale? If the answer to those, if any of those reasons resonated with you, rethink your program. Now is the time. And as I've always talked about, it's an opportunity for you to stake claim from an HR perspective in your companies as being leaders. Let's address each one of those four in light of the information that the EEOC gave us. What about this reluctance to report? How do we reduce that? What about this? What about as part of your training, we increase significantly the pool of individuals who may come forward? What if we talk not only to the targets of the training or of the harassment? What if we talk to our workforce as a total and we train a new generation of bystander cooperation with regard to harassment, making sure that all employees understand that this is a collective responsibility in the workplace? Communicate, add into your training. This is not just for the targets, it's for everybody. Let us know. Create awareness for all people that harassment is not okay, and that bystanders, even those who are not the direct focus, even if they are observing it, still are empowered to help that workplace, to report it, to get involved when the target is reluctant to do so. Encouraging all employees to speak out on the topic. I think that it is a wonderful message to include into a very rote and stale training program. Right? Inviting the bystanders, empowering them and inviting them to use the same complaint procedures that are available to the targets of harassment. Right? Multiplying the number of people involved in the process will reduce the number of people who are reluctant to complain. Make a business case. Go into the CEO's office. Speak to her or him about how important this really is and the ancillary effects of effectively conducting training in your workplace. Make sure that top management is assisting in translating that training into a very essential aspect of your culture. I happen to believe, and I've done hundreds of training programs for companies throughout Long Island, the ones that are most effective are the ones that include an introduction from the CEO and from the president, where he or she comes and says, this is Chris Valentino. He is a boring lawyer, but he's here because we believe in this topic. We believe that it is essential to our culture, and this is the way that we operate. I'm going to sit in here, and I'm going to listen to it. And I want you to pay attention. If you have questions, I want to hear them. I have questions about this stuff. There is complete buy-in. Those are the companies that have the culture that you want to emulate, where the top people in the company buy into what we're trying to do. I love when we have high-level executives introduced to training. Even if you don't have a lawyer come in and do it, have them sit in the HR training. It's critical. And I also love when those top-level executives communicate to human resources, now that we've done the training, now we have to hold people accountable for it. Let's build it into our evaluation process. How are those supervisors relating to people in the workplace? Are they taking this seriously? Now you have the makings of a different type of culture when it comes to anti-harassment programs, right? The more effective the training can be, the better. That's simple, all right? Let's move away from just talking to people about the elements of a quid pro quo claim or a hostile work environment claim. Here are some different ideas for us to re-energize our training programs. Number one, build in real-life hypotheticals. We have unbelievable discussions about the things HR professionals are dealing with when we have our monthly SHRM meetings, when we do the breakfast series. The hypotheticals are fantastic. Take them, build them in, make them real life. Get people engaged in your hypotheticals is a way of communicating the message as opposed to talking about the legal stuff. Incorporating diversity and inclusion in your training programs, I think, is becoming more and more of an essential. What I'd love to see the HR world do is stop addressing just the harassment, try and address the symptoms in the workplace that cause the harassment. If we can increase not only the diversity, but we can also increase the inclusion of diverse people in meaningful movements in the workplace, that will ultimately help you in a battle against harassment. So working to encourage that inclusivity among your supervisors, make sure you're getting different perspectives, making sure that you make the diverse workforce feel more included is ultimately going to help you avoid people feeling uncomfortable, i.e. harassed in the workplace. And I think probably one of the biggest things that we need to do as an HR community is we have to stop looking at harassment in an effort to try and avoid what's unlawful now. What we need to do is start looking at the breeding grounds for harassment. Where does it begin? And I'm seeing more and more issues of workplace bullying. We need to incorporate into our training, separate and apart what's illegal, the stuff that violates your policies. The way that we treat people, that's not on an illegal basis. You need to promote workplace civility. We need to be preventing all forms of harassment, regardless of whether a lawsuit can be filed. We need to establish for all of our people this expectation that not only will you not violate the law, but you will act and you will conduct yourself in a way that is professional, that is ethical, and collegial. Build in that level of civility and respect, and now all of a sudden you will see a different type of workplace, a different type of culture emerging. All right? Let them know what your expectations are. Discuss the workplace norms. And don't be afraid to delve into the creation of interpersonal skill-based training for your supervisors on how do we resolve conflict. And look, in my opinion, most of this stuff is, most of the issues that we deal with in the workplace are really personality conflicts that ultimately get out of hand, and then the emergence of a lawsuit. Bullying is problematic, and I think it's very important that we build it into our training programs, especially our anti-harassment training programs. There is a significant effect that it has on the employer. As I said before, we lose talented people and people shut down. There is the emergence of workplace violence. You also have that psychological effect on a workplace as a whole when you allow people to act in a way that is not civil and bully others. And finally, we're always faced, even if it's not actionable, always faced with an ancillary lawsuit, whether it be a New York tort, whether it be the emergence of some sort of discrimination or harassment claim. So the takeaway into your training, let's build in that bystander responsibility. Let's build in some hypotheticals. Let's build in real life stuff, and let's build in workplace bullying prevention training. All right, your takeaways today, just a couple of things I leave you with. Interesting comments from the EEOC about zero tolerance. Not necessarily a big fan of zero tolerance, because employees may feel as if, look, if it's zero tolerance and I report, now all of a sudden is somebody going to get terminated? I don't want that conflict. I don't want that responsibility. I will shy away from reporting. All right. As always, have your anti-harassment policies give multiple sources of complaint. It is not okay just to say report it to your supervisor. Consider the creation of a workplace bullying policy. I think it's essential going forward. And finally, live by what you teach. This is, again, an opportunity for HR to be a leader in this area. Let's seize it. Let's make the most. Take a look at the report over what will be a very rainy weekend. So I hear you will have plenty of time to do it. Any questions, as always, certainly funnel them my way. Have a great weekend, and we will talk to you next month. Bye-bye.